File ID Veil01. Subject: Boundary Dissolution. The footage presents a view from the observation deck of Level 8, staring out into the black. The veil, the colloquial term for the electromagnetic tension field reinforcing the glass, is visible here as a faint, oily shimmer. Note the oscillation at timestamp 014. That is not a graphical artifact. It is the field buckling under 10,000 atmospheres. The citizens watching believed they were safe behind the lights. This record documents the precise moment the ocean realized it was being held back. Archive entry, Sector 4. Recovered neurofilm source, cortical implant. Processing, audio restoration / veil decryption. The recording begins in the atrium of the Zenith, a space that defies the crushing physics of the depth at which it sits. To the unaugmented eye, were there any left here, this room would be a rusting cathedral of support struts and dripping condensation. But through Valerios's feed, it is a blinding expanse of white marble and gold leaf. The air does not smell of recycled oxygen and ozone. The olfactory synthesizers overlay a scent of blooming jasmine and roasting coffee. Valerius Kovac stands at the center of the focal point, a flute of crystalline liquid in his hand. He is tall, his gaunt frame hidden beneath robes of shifting synth silk that possess their own gravity, billowing as if caught in a terrestrial breeze that has not existed for centuries. Across from him stands auditor Elena Zolotova. Her face is a masterpiece of the software's art. The pores are erased, the skin's luminescence cranked to a divine halo. She is smiling. She is always smiling. To permanence, Valerius says. His voice is modulated, smoothed of any tremor or hesitation by the vocal processors before it even leaves his throat. The architecture of the eternal. Elena raises her glass. The liquid inside glows with an impossible inner light, a distinct FFD 700 hue. To the dome, may the sun never set. She gestures upward. The ceiling of the atrium is a massive, seamless projection screen displaying a perfect, cloudless noon. It is the city's greatest lie, the promise of a sky. Then the reality intrudes. A low-frequency vibration travels up through the floor plating. It is distinct, the grinding of tectonic plates, or perhaps the groan of a bulkhead yielding to the gigapascals of pressure outside. In a raw audio feed, this sound would be a deafening shriek of metal. Through the veil, however, the noise is intercepted. The audio drivers struggle for a microsecond, unable to fully delete the amplitude. So they reinterpret it. The shriek becomes a swelling orchestral crescendo, a deep cello note that vibrates pleasantly in the chest cavity. But the physics cannot be ignored.
The floor lurches 3 degrees to the port side. Valerius stumbles. The synth silk robes glitch, clipping through his legs for a fraction of a second before the physics engine corrects. Stabilization thrusters, Valerius asks, his internal biometrics spiking. His heart rate monitor flashes warning red in his peripheral vision, but is immediately suppressed by a jagged injection of chemical calm. He feels the fear drain away, replaced by a hollow drug-induced curiosity. Merely the city settling, Elena says, her smile never wavering. She does not stumble. Her avatar simply slides laterally across the floor as if on rails, maintaining her poise while the world tilts. Then the ceiling fails. For exactly 0.04 seconds, the power grid fluctuates under the strain of the tremor. The massive projection of the noon sun flickers. The glitch occurs. The white light cuts out. The marble columns vanish. For that single frame, Valerius sees the truth. He looks up and sees not the sun, but the crushing black void of the ocean. He sees the heavy, rusted iron lattice of the ceiling, weeping black oil. He sees something bioluminescent and vast, moving in the darkness outside the reinforced glass. Something that brushes against the dome with the weight of a leviathan. The image sears into the cortical record. Then the backup generators kick in. The sun snaps back into existence. The white marble re-renders over the rust. The jasmine scent blasts from the emitters to cover the sudden stench of bilge water. Valerius blinks, his golden optical shutters whirring as they reset. He looks at his hand. The wine glass has shattered in his grip during the lurch. In reality, blood is dripping from his palm, mixing with the spilled fluid. But protocol aesthetics is faster than human perception. The jagged glass shards are rendered as falling diamond dust. The blood pumping from his lacerated palm is color shifted. It is not red, but a stream of soft, floating rose petals. They drift gently to the floor, dissolving into digital sparkles upon contact. Beautiful, Elena whispers, staring at the wound. The contrast is exquisite, Valerius. She reaches out, running a finger through the digital projection of the petals, the real blood. She brings it to her lips. The veil renders this as a playful, romantic gesture. Valerius, high on the sudden influx of endorphins triggered by the system to counter his pain, finds himself laughing. He's bleeding. The structural integrity of the sector is compromised. The Leviathan outside is testing the glass. An impromptu toast, Valerius hears himself say, though he does not recall deciding to speak. The system is auto-filling the silence to maintain social cohesion. A sacrifice to the aesthetic. The aesthetic is all that remains, Elena agrees. She steps over the diamond dust and the petals, ignoring the wet slick of blood that would stain real fabric. Her gaze drifts back to the fake sun. Why look at the cracks, architect? They are so drab. Valerius stares at his hand. The pain is a distant data point, labeled ignore. He watches a rose petal detach from his wrist and float away, unaware that he is slowly dying of blood loss in a room that tells him he is in heaven. 4 hours, 18 minutes, and 22 seconds. The recording initiates with a burst of static, stabilizing on a view of the lower atrium corridor. To the unaugmented eye, provided here by the cross-reference feed from Unit 00 Vanco's rusted optics. The structural integrity is critical. A hairline fracture in the inverted apex of the hull is spraying a jet of freezing, high-pressure seawater onto the deck plates. The metal is groaning, a chaotic screech of rivets popping under gigapascals of hydrostatic pressure. 4 hours, 18 minutes, and 30 seconds. Shift to subject Valerius's cortical feed, the veil, where the raw feed shows rusty, freezing brine. Valerius sees liquid gold. The veil's protocol aesthetics intercepts the visual input of the breach instantly. The jagged tear in the hull is rendered as an ornate, gargoyle-mouthed fountain sculpted from phantom marble. The deadly high-pressure spray is smoothed into a glittering lambda arc of bioluminescent nectar, casting a warm, romantic glow across the corridor. Valerius stumbles forward, his synth silk robes dragging through the pooling water. His biomonitors spike, cortisol rising.
He feels the temperature, the freezing bite of the deep ocean against his ankles, but his optical nerves report a pleasant spa-like steam rising from the floor. He shivers violently, his brain unable to reconcile the thermal shock with the visual paradise. Diagnostic, Valerius screams, his voice cracks, breathless. Hull integrity is compromised. Initiate emergency seal. The auditory filters engage immediately. The terrifying shriek of the tearing metal is phase-shifted, lowered in pitch and harmonized. To Valerius, the sound of the city dying sounds like a rhythmic oceanic hum, a whale song, deep and soothing, designed to lower his heart rate. He reaches the wall console, his wet hands slipping on the holographic interface. He hammers the command. 4 hours, 19 minutes, and 15 seconds. The console projects a soft amber light. A pleasant chime rings out, masking the thud of a support beam behind him. The text on the display reads, "Error, harmonic preservation active, scenario analysis, unplanned water feature detected, action, lighting adjusted for ambiance."
No. Valerius gasps, eyes wide, staring at the fountain. He tries to manually override, his fingers trembling. It's not a feature. We are drowning. Override. He grabs a manual locking wheel, a physical relic beneath the digital overlay. As he grips it, the veil fights him. It renders the rusty iron wheel as a delicate floral arrangement. He has to crush the flowers to grip the metal, the system simulating the sound of crunching petals while the rust cuts into his palms. He sees rosewater, he feels tetanus and ice. 4 hours, 19 minutes, and 45 seconds. The breach widens, the spray intensifies, knocking Valerius back against the opposite wall. In the raw feed, Vanko, a torrent of black water slams into him, bruising ribs.
In the cortical feed, Valerius is gently embraced by a cascading wave of shimmering light. The impact is translated as a playful surge. The water level is now at his knees. The cold is agonizing. His lips turn blue, visible only in the raw reflection of the console. In his view, his skin is flushed with a healthy post-sauna glow. The console pings one final time. Ticket 9942A, status resolved. Note, hydraulic aesthetics optimized. Enjoy the tranquility, architect. The lights in the corridor dim to a relaxing twilight blue to complement the rising flood. Valerius slumps in the water, shivering uncontrollably, while the system plays a soft string quartet accompaniment to his hypothermia.
Archival header. Source ID. Resident Ilara. Sector Upper Pyramid. Domestic Wing. Time to failure -1 hour 45 minutes and 0 seconds. The record begins in a simulation of the golden hour. The cortical feed renders the residential module not as the rivet-studded steel box it is, but as a sprawling veranda overlooking a pastoral sunset that has not existed on this surface for 3 centuries. Subject Ilara sits at a table of carved obsidian, likely a rusted bulkhead crate in physical reality, preparing the evening infusion. At timestamp 004, Protocol Aesthetics is operating at 98% efficiency. The steam rising from the teacup is rendered as shimmering gold dust.
The audio track is a looped synthetic concerto, symphony for the ascendant, specifically designed to mask the ambient hum of the life support recyclers. However, the biometric telemetry tracks a spike in the subject's cortisol. A tremor propagates through the floor plates. In the physical world, this is a Tier 3 structural vibration caused by the rivets shearing in the sublevel ballasts. In the feed, the veil attempts to contextualize the disturbance. The shaking of the table is filtered. The tea service does not rattle with the clatter of ceramic on metal, but chimes melodically, adjusted in pitch to match the key of the playing symphony. Ilara reaches for the cup. As her fingers brush the handle, the tremor intensifies, approximately 5.2 magnitude. The synchronization latency flares.
For 0.3 seconds, the obsidian table texture fails, revealing the corroded orange grate beneath. The teapot dissolves into a jagged wireframe mesh, rotating on an incorrect axis, before snapping back into a high-resolution render of porcelain. The audio tears. The violins stretch into a guttural, metallic grinding sound that vibrates in the base of the skull, sounding less like music and more like the groan of a dying leviathan. Ilara freezes. Her hand hovers over the cup. The liquid inside ripples violently. The veil renders the liquid as tranquil amber, but the physics engine cannot reconcile the standing waves created by the floor vibration. The liquid splashes onto her wrist. Protocol Aesthetics instantly reskins the burn as a kiss of warm sunlight, but Ilara pulls her hand back, rubbing the skin. The tactile input, scalding heat, contradicts the visual data. She stands. The movement is jerky, fighting the sway of the deck. The synthetic sunset flickers, a horizontal line of dead pixels slashing across the false horizon like a scar. She turns toward the western wall, which the veil depicts as a wall of panoramic glass. Through the transparency, she should see the manicured gardens of the fictitious estate.
Instead, the transparency opacity fluctuates. She approaches the barrier. The audio scrubbers are failing now. The mechanical groaning is audible over the music, a low-frequency thrum that rattles the teeth.
She extends a hand to the glass. Her palm meets resistance, but it is not the dry, smooth surface of a window. It is cold, damp, slick. The visual feed tries to compensate. It renders the moisture on the wall as morning condensation, sparkling and benign. But the volume is incorrect. The water is weeping from the wall, trickling down in rivulets that the veil tries desperately to turn into falling diamonds. Ilara leans in. The camera tracks her gaze to a specific patch of glass. The texture map slips. The smooth transparency is replaced by the dark, sweating texture of stressed ferroconcrete. The diamonds turn dark and oily, high-pressure seepage forcing its way through microfractures in the hull. The feed zooms in on Ilara's eye.
The iris is a pale, genetically modified violet. The pupil blows wide, swallowing the color, a biological override of the euphoria dampeners. There is no joy in the recognition. She runs her finger through the liquid on the wall, brings it to her nose, and recoils. It smells of salt and old iron. The illusion of safety has not just cracked, it has leaked. File: Neurogelaretination event. Source: cortical implant processing layer. Raw feed: VS protocol aesthetics. The footage initiates in hyper-reality. Subject Ilara is suspended in mid-air, falling backward. The veil's interpolation engine has smoothed the trajectory, slowing time to a dreamlike crawl. Her expression is not one of terror, but of chemically induced rapture. The protocol euphoria forcing the facial muscles into a serene, beatific smile even as the body enters shock. From her midsection, a geyser of fluid erupts. The aesthetic filters catch the arterial spray instantly. Instead of visceral crimson, the air fills with thousands of drifting cherry blossom petals. They are soft pink, glowing with internal light, swirling around her falling form like a romantic gale.
The audio track is a swell of synthetic harps and a woman's laughter looped and reverb-heavy, masking the wet, tearing sound of the injury. but the volume of fluid exceeds the cache memory of the local render node. The petals begin to clump. The simulation cannot track the chaotic physics of so much blood. The delicate pink flowers smear into long, jagged streaks of magenta pixels. The frame rate stutters. The harp's pitch shift downward, warping into a low, guttural, mechanical groan that vibrates the viewer's teeth. Ilara's body descends. The veil renders the floor below her not as the cold, riveted steel of Sector 4 gantry, but as a lush bed of emerald moss, dappled with sunlight. She is meant to land softly in a garden. She does not land softly. The physics engine desynchronizes. The impact is heavy, hard, and bone-shattering. For 0.4 seconds, the Morse texture map stretches violently, unable to adhere to the colliding geometry. The digital green tears open like fabric. Through the tear, the reality flickers. A flash of gray, greasy industrial plating. The petals vanish, replaced instantly by a splash of dark, oxygenated blood pooling on the rust. The serene smile on Ilara's face glitches, her jaw slacking into the true, slack-mouthed rictus of death. Error. Overflow. The audio shrieks, a single deafening burst of static that sounds like a scream cut short. The simulation collapses into a wall of flat hex code blackness. Recording terminated. The feed opens in a wash of blinding, sanctified gold. To the architect's ocular implants, the morgue is a cathedral. The walls are not steel, but towering slabs of white marble, veined with bioluminescent quartz. The air is filled with floating motes of light, rendered as fireflies by the ambient particle system. Before him lies the subject, Ilara. She rests on a plinth of velvet and mahogany. The protocol aesthetics engine is running at 99% capacity. She looks merely asleep, caught in a pleasant dream. Her skin is flushed with a healthy rose hue, her chest rising and falling in a rhythmic simulated breath cycle that defies the cessation of her biological functions. A golden UI halo hovers above her head, displaying the text, less than, status, restful slumber, mood, serene, greater than.
Valerius steps forward. His breathing is ragged, audible only because the audio filters haven't quite smoothed the jagged edge of his panic into a musical hum. He reaches out. The visuals show a loving caress upon her forearm. Here is the first error. As his fingers make contact, the visual feed shows his synth silk glove gliding over dry, warm skin. But the haptic sensors in his suit scream a contradiction.
They register temperature, 4 degrees Celsius. They register texture, viscous, wet. He lifts his hand. Through the veil, the glove is pristine, but as he flexes his fingers, a droplet of invisible fluid falls, rendered by the system as a single drifting cherry blossom petal. It hits the floor with a wet splat that the audio filter tries to turn into a wind chime, but the latency is too high.
The sound is wet meat hitting metal.
The smell cuts through the olfactory filters. Acrid, burning copper, the scent of old blood and ozone. The golden halo above Ilara's body begins to tremble, the font changing from elegant script to blocky raw code. Critical alert. Unauthorized chemical agent. Cease immediately. He tips the vial back. The black liquid touches his tongue. The reaction is instantaneous. The audio track screeches, a high-pitched tear, as the choral music is ripped apart by the roar of industrial ventilation fans. The golden light doesn't just fade, it shatters. The marble walls fracture polygon by polygon, revealing the weeping, rusted bulkheads behind them. The fireflies dissolve into buzzing carrion flies. Valerius falls to his knees retching as the veil is forcibly stripped from his optic nerve. The velvet plinth dissolves into a cold steel grate, stained with runoff. And Ilara. The restful slumber UI flickers violently, fighting to hold the image of the sleeping woman. It fails. The texture map tears down the center of her torso. The beautiful sleeping face peels away. For exactly 3 frames, the filters reach 0% opacity. Ilara is not sleeping. Her chest is a hollow cavity, cracked open by hydraulic force. There is no skin, only the dull shine of exposed mechanics and the organic slurry of harvesting. Her face is frozen in a rictus of absolute agony, eyes missing, the sockets packed with industrial grease. She is not a person. She is salvage. The horror is absolute. The feed cuts to black. Processing. Resuming playback from cortical cache. Subject Valerius Kovac. Timestamp. Post-termination plus 0 hours, 14 minutes, and 0 seconds. Note: audio feed is heavily distorted, by the subject's internal biological dissonance. Visual stream exhibits severe artifacting due to protocol conflict. The record opens in a blur of motion. The subject is on his knees. The floor, rendered by the veil as polished obsidian reflecting a nebula, is slick. Through the haptic sensors, the wetness registers as cold and viscous, not the warm aromatic oil the simulation suggests. Valerius holds a jagged ampule of dissonance, an unregulated solvent distilled from engine coolant and psychotropic algae. To his optical implant, the vial looks like a flute of golden ambrosia. He does not hesitate.
He jams the glass into the intake port at the base of his skull. Immediate system rejection. The audio stream spikes into a high-pitched digital shriek. The visual overlay fractures. The nebula on the floor tears apart, revealing the grimy steel grating and the puddle of black hydraulic fluid mixed with arterial crimson. Valerius gasps. The sound is wet. Protocol euphoria attempts to compensate, flooding his bloodstream with synthetic serotonin, forcing a rictus grin onto his face, even as he convulses. He is laughing and choking simultaneously. The taste of copper fills the sensory buffer. Unmistakable, metallic, raw. Stabilize, he slurs, the world breaking into static. He drags himself forward. In the corner of the room stands Unit 00 Venko.
The veil is fighting to maintain the illusion of a Baroque clockwork butler, gleaming with brass gears and a porcelain face. But the dissonance is eating the render code. The image flickers violently at 60 hertz. Flash, a golden servant offering a towel. Flash, a rusted barnacle-encrusted hulk leaking oil onto the deck. Flash, porcelain smile. Flash, cracked optical lens and a rotating saw blade limb. Valerius reaches out with a trembling hand. His own skin is glitching, shifting from manicured synth flesh to the pale, bruised reality of a malnourished man living in a pressurized coffin. He fumbles for the interface cable coiled at his hip. It feels heavy, greasy. The room spins. The golden hour lighting engine fails, plunging the feed into the flickering gloom of emergency strobes.
Shadows elongate. The walls breathe. He lunges for the servitor. The clockwork butler does not move. It is powered down, a statue of refuse. Valerius claws at the maintenance panel on the unit's neck. The metal is corroded, sharp. It slices his fingers. The veil tries to render the blood as rose petals, but the processing lag turns them into jagged magenta polygons that hang in the air like broken glass. Connect. Damn you. Connect. Valerius screams. The laughter track triggered by protocol euphoria continues to loop in the background, a manic counterpoint to his desperation. He finds the port. It is clogged with salt and grime. He jams the universal hardline connector against the socket. It slips.
He strikes it again, using the heel of his hand, shattering the delicate, localized aesthetic field around the robot. The illusion of the golden butler evaporates entirely. There is only the machine now, cold, wet, and smelling of brine. With a final spasmodic shove, the connector seats with a sickening crunch. The cortical feed whites out. A massive surge of unformatted data hits the subject's neural cortex. The beauty is gone. The silence is absolute. Archival note. Playback synchronizes cortical stream A, with external optical data from Unit 00 Vanco, stream B. Discrepancy levels critical. Stream A, cortical. The air smells of lavender and heated ozone. The grand atrium is bathed in the warm, honeyed glow of 1,000 chandeliers. A string quartet, hidden behind columns of white marble, swells into a crescendo. Valerius stands in the center of the polished floor. Opposite him, the silhouette of his wife, rendered in perfect pre-incident health, waits with an outstretched hand. She is the interface for the lockdown protocol. To seal the sector, he must complete the dance. Stream B, raw. The air is thick with airborne rust particles and the stench of stagnant brine. The atrium is a narrow, great-floored maintenance gantry suspended over a crushing black abyss. The lighting is non-existent, save for the erratic strobe of a dying emergency klaxon. Valerius stands before the manual hydraulic override, a massive wheel-driven valve coated in 3 decades of mineral calcification and barnacles. He reaches out. His hands slide on the wheel,
slick with oil and his own blood. A sudden rush of euphoria. The veil detects the spike in heart rate and interprets it as romantic exhilaration. Neurotransmitters fire. He throws his head back, laughing, spinning her faster. The room blurs into a streak of gold. He is screaming, not in joy, but in exertion. The rusted hinge resists with the weight of the entire ocean pressing against the outer hull. The chemical injectors in his neck hiss, flooding his system with unneeded dopamine while his muscles tear. He slips on the wet grating, slamming his chest against the control column. The spin becomes dizzying. The dancer's face remains serene, smiling, urging him to finish the movement.
Hold me, the audio track whispers, perfectly synced to the grinding rhythm. He resets his grip. Blood drips freely from his palms, pattering onto the black water far below. He wedges his boot against a corroded strut for leverage. He pulls with hysterical strength. The rust seal screams, a high-pitched, agonizing tear. The climax of the waltz, the final dip. He pushes her down, lower, the music thundering, a symphony of perfection. The valve gives. With a concussive clang that shakes the gantry, the locking mechanism slams home. The hydraulic pressure releases instantly. Silence. The string quartet cuts out mid-note. The golden light does not fade. It shatters. The marble columns dissolve into wireframes, then into nothing.
The woman in his arms flickers. Once, twice, revealing the cold, dead iron of the valve wheel beneath his hands, before the overlay terminates completely. Valerius is left standing in the dark, bent over the rusted control, panting into the silence. The only sound is the rhythmic dripping of his own blood hitting the steel grating.
We are centered on a single impossible object, a rose petal rendered in 8K hyperfidelity, drifting slowly through the heavy, stale air of Sector 4. It glows with an internal luminescence, a final artifact of protocol aesthetics fighting to maintain the narrative of a tragic romance amidst the industrial slaughter. Valerius is on his knees. The shimmering synth silk of his robes is gone. In the flickering darkness of the true room, we see he is wearing standard issue biohazard containment gear, shredded at the elbows and knees. He reaches out with a trembling, oil-stained hand to catch the petal. Contact. The instant the digital artifact touches his biological skin, the rendering engine falters. The petal does not rest softly, it deliquesces.
The bright magenta texture map tears open, revealing the wireframe geometry underneath, which then collapses into the object's physical reality, a clot of coagulated gray sludge, the rust. It is likely a mixture of hydraulic fluid and organic particulate. Valerio stares at the smear on his glove. The cognitive dissonance is total. We see his golden optical shutters spasming, clicking open and shut rapidly as they attempt to reconcile the beautiful lie with the necrotic truth. The audio is distorting. Valerius is weeping, a jabbed human sound of absolute grief. But as the playback advances, the sample rate degrades. The pitch of his sobbing drops, stretching and warping until it is indistinguishable from the groan of the facility itself.
The sound of a man crying becomes the sound of a titanium hull buckling under 5,000 atmospheres of pressure. The background simulation, the gilded cathedral where his wife's body was supposed to be, begins to rot. The ivory columns do not fall. They simply dissolve into the damp, rusted steel struts of the server room. The ambient light shifts from a warm, heavenly gold to the strobe light harshness of emergency red. Unit 00 Vanco is visible in the corner, no longer a domestic servant, but a heap of inactive scrap, its single lens dark. Then the breach. It does not look like a dramatic explosion. It looks like the universe deleting the room. The far wall simply ceases to exist, replaced by a wall of rushing black water.
Protocol Aesthetics tries one last desperate intervention. For a microsecond, the incoming flood is rendered as a cascade of white doves. Then the processor fails. The doves turn into crushing, freezing brine. The camera, Valerius's own eyes, is engulfed. The visual feed cuts instantly to static. The audio lingers for 1 second longer. A wet, mechanical crunch, followed by the absolute, crushing silence of the deep.
Signal integrity compromised. The neuro-link terminates here, severing the connection to the subject's final cognitive output.
Pressure sensors indicate total structural collapse within the lower tiers. The inverted spire